Within a naval engagement, every ship has a role to play. Understanding these roles and exploiting them to their full potential is key to owning the battle space. These roles range from opportunists, to bruisers, to support, and much more. Every ship to some degree can fill these various roles, and some are far better suited than others. Welcome pilots, my name is Hybrid V, and in this video series we'll talk about the various ship fighter types and their role during a combat engagement, starting with the light fighter class. Please note that this video is primarily focusing its attention on team play dynamics during a naval engagement, not solo 1v1 combat. A lot of this info can be applicable for PvE, but much of the advice here is centered around PvP combat. Let's get started. Light fighters are nimble skirmishers with high skill ceilings compared to other fighter types, often having very little in the way of personal protection from incoming fire, and can also lack the punching power of its heavier siblings. They instead trade protection and firepower for high speed and agility. This means that you never want light fighters on frontline brawls, since their lack of protection means that they can be destroyed quickly in a head-to-head engagement. Instead, light fighters excel at sharking on the outside edges of a battle, using their superior speed to stay away from the fight and keep themselves from being the focus of the enemy's attention. While sharking the edges of a battle, light fighters need to keep an eye out for weakened opponents and friendlies in need of aid in the battle. An enemy being the focus of friendlies, or an enemy that is trying to escape to recharge shields, are prime targets for light fighters, as their superior speed and agility means they can opportunistically drop in on their foes and unload on them in the back along with other friendlies. They also can be used in a supporting role. For example, a friendly calls out that their shields are down and they're being pursued as they try to recharge. The light fighters can then spring into action, locating the friendly and flying at high speeds in nav mode to reach them. They drop out of nav right on top of the threat and immediately start engaging, quickly stripping the enemy of their shields and either causing them to wave off and evade or stay and die to the incoming barrage. This surprise ambush tactic is one of the biggest strengths of the light fighter. However, staying in the scrap for long periods after already springing the ambush could potentially put the light fighter at risk. This is why it is critically important as a light fighter to adopt an evasive defensive strategy even when you're on the offensive. The moment a light fighter's shields start to take damage while assisting in a fight is the right moment for it to peel off and disengage. Always disengage before the shields are fully depleted. Remember that light fighters have very little health and shielding. Even the venerable Gladius with its decent HP pool and 2 shield generators cannot stand up for long against sustained attacks, especially if it is surprised by another medium or other light fighter. It is always better to stay slippery and frustrate your opponents rather than straight up brawling. A common defensive strategy for light fighter evasion is to drop noise chaff clouds and immediately boost away while engaging nav mode. This is known as the squid ink or pocket sand disengage. This defensive maneuver limits effective enemy fire as they can lose lock temporarily, and by the time they re-establish the lock, the fighter is already in nav mode and rapidly gaining speed and widening the distance. Even if the opponent tries to counter with missiles, the distance can be too large to cover in a short period of time. Even if forced out of nav to drop countermeasures, there will be more than enough time for the light fighter to recharge shields, boost, and weapon capacitors. Also note that in the persistent universe, decoys and noise clouds can take several seconds to properly spawn into the world due to server performance issues. So it's always better to preempt decoys and noise ahead of time, being more proactive rather than reactive. Listen closely for the secondary explosion sound effect that comes from noise when it is deployed. When you hear this sound, you know that the noise cloud is now in play and spawned in, and you can start to nav to disengage. In dense atmosphere and normal gravity planets, light fighters can be at a huge disadvantage due to the much slower speeds imparted on all ships. The noise cloud strategy is still effective, but pilots will want to instead boost while pointing straight up as they engage nav mode to escape. This is due to the increasing altitude imparting less drag and increasing the ship's top speed the higher it climbs. Light fighters can slice through the air better than any other fighter type, but boosting away to lower altitudes or staying equal at your altitude will cost more boost in the long run over just boosting straight up. Speaking of boost, it is the lifeblood of a light fighter. Once it runs dry, the light fighter's options are severely limited. Its ability to run, dodge, and fight are completely hampered without boost. No light fighter pilot should ever enter the battle without boost. Even disengaging to recharge boost is a valid tactic. It's just that important for a light fighter to maintain. The light fighter's primary targets during a naval engagement are going to be other light fighters. They can help against mediums and heavies in a pinch, but they excel best during a 1v1 scenario against other light fighters. If forced into a 1v1 nose-to-nose versus a medium or heavy, a light fighter can kill them if they're skilled enough and have the right loadout. However, the odds are stacked against them, and the main issue is the time to kill. TTKs, time to kills, currently can be very long versus these tougher ships, and the mistakes have a higher cost for the lighter fighter. This is why it's always better in a team scenario for the light fighter to ambush heavier targets rather than going toe-to-toe with them. A support ambush will guarantee that the target is preoccupied and will not be able to mount a nose-to-nose defense against a lighter, more agile threat. Light fighters also make excellent pursuit fighters. Their higher accelerations mean they can chase down missile boats and fleeing ships with ease. Now this does come with a big skill check, as chasing players in nav mode requires excellent throttle control and timing from the pursuing fighter. If pulled off well, the pursuer can easily punish runaways. Light fighters also make great recon and an element lead craft when a proper command and control vessel is not immediately available in the vicinity. Their ability to shark around the edges of the combat space gives them a unique advantage of monitoring the battle from the sidelines, allowing them to call out enemies that are fleeing or whether their reinforcements are coming, and much more. They can cycle enemy targets and find the weakest one for their allies to go after, and can spot when friendlies need assistance. Any missiles a light fighter carries should be fired off immediately in an engagement. Missiles impart additional weight on the ship carrying it, and thus it affects performance. Remember that missiles tend to get used against ships fleeing in nav mode, but light fighters already excel in this area, so missiles are not necessary for them to be successful in a pursuit. Primary missile targets for light fighters should always be mediums and heavy fighters, which tend to struggle to evade smaller missile types, even with decoy countermeasures. That being said, if you're going against light fighters, don't waste your missiles on them unless you're sure they don't have countermeasures. Their smaller signatures mean they can easily decoy off missiles. Even EM missiles, which are the most commonly used in PvP and can be easily spoofed due to the smaller signature size of light fighters. Couple that with server lag and just the general nimble nature of light fighters, you generally are going to see a mixed, if not poor, result using missiles against them. Save them for the bigger fish. Light fighters operate best in pairs, covering each other as they dive in on targets. If one gets attacked, the other can rapidly respond by pushing the attacker off. They can also combine their firepower against a single target to improve the chances of a kill. Smart pilots will also use pairs to string out opponents as they give chase, giving the wingman an opportunity to pick the would-be pursuer off. And this dual strategy also ensures that if one pilot needs to flee to recharge, the other can follow and assist against any other light fighters giving chase. Communication is crucial to success when operating as a two-ship flight in a battle. They also can operate in swarm packs, constantly buzzing targets. However, due to the fragile nature of light fighters, their numbers can dwindle rapidly if no other medium or heavy fighters are there to support them. Okay, let's talk about light fighter loadouts. To keep this video brief and succinct, this will be a general overview of loadout types rather than an exhaustive analysis due to the amount of weapon variety available to all ships in the current game. If you want to dive into the theory crafting a bit more, there will be links below to get you started. First, let's talk about anti-material weapons, such as lasers and ballistic cannons. Now they can have slower projectile speeds, but high amounts of damage. This means that lighter fighters will need to get closer to guarantee hits, which can be risky. Couple that with the light fighters' weak weapon capacitors, you can expect them to have to recharge constantly and slowly. Even worse is that in patch 3.24, cannons are going to get a nerf to their accuracy, limiting their effectiveness at medium ranges. Slap these on a light fighter if you want to knock out bigger game with ambush tactics. Just remember that you will be outranged by other fighters sporting anti-fighter weapons. Now, speaking of anti-fighter weapons, such as laser repeaters and ballistic gatlings, they have higher projectile velocities at the cost of reduced damage per shot, and higher levels of inaccuracy as well. Despite these drawbacks, they can be used at all ranges, making them excellent counters to ships fielding close-range anti-material weapons. There is also a psychological effect that comes with these weapons. While they don't do a lot of damage, they can do a constant barrage of fire, which can cause pilots to panic as their shields flash and they can hear the rounds pounding the ship. They also make great weapons for spooking targets that are on friendlies. Just remember that the lack of stopping power means you will need to go through multiple charge cycles to take down heavier craft. Now, ballistic weapons tend to be largely misunderstood in the game. Their biggest drawback, of course, is their limited ammo and the lack of damage they do to shielded targets. While there is some partial penetration that causes reduced damage, the target's armor will further reduce incoming damage anyway. This means that mono-boating all ballistics can be a disadvantage for a light fighter during a combat engagement, since bringing shields down is critical to get the most out of ballistic weapons, and failing to do that means you're potentially wasting a lot of ammo. Mixing a loadout with lasers and ballistics can help, but mono-boating ballistics can still be devastating when used in a support role. For example, let's say we have two wingmen, one with laser loadouts and the other with ballistic loadouts. The one with lasers can strip the target's shields while the other shreds them to pieces with ballistics, a very powerful combination. Okay, missiles. Here's the thing, always stick with EM missiles as they tend to be the strongest at holding locks and defeating decoys. I won't talk much more about missiles currently because they are right now in an unfinished state and will be getting big reworks in later patches like 4.0 and beyond. So for now, stick with EM missiles just as a general rule of thumb, and try to target much larger ships with them and fire them off one at a time to drain their decoy reserves. As a light fighter, don't hang around the area for too long when you have no decoys. The light fighter can dodge missiles if timed right, but it only takes one well-placed hit to destroy the craft or at least rip an engine off. And with the server performance the way it is now, it's probably not a good idea to play chicken with missiles and the server. Light fighters used to be the king of PvP in older builds of the game. Today though, they have a much more well-defined role, rather than just being a jack of all trades like they used to be. Their strengths and limitations set them clearly apart from the rest of the pack, and this ensures they stay in their lane when operating as part of a squadron during a PvP or even a PvE encounter. The skill ceiling required to operate these craft is much higher than other fighter types, requiring pilots to be communicative, have a level head, and of course, have some level of cunning, as it doesn't take much to take these things out, so playing smart is key to a light fighter's survival. But above all, the most important thing is stick time. Learning all we talked about here today will mean nothing if a pilot doesn't bother to put in the flight hours required to actually get good at using these craft. In the follow-up video to this series, we'll talk about the various light fighter types currently in the game and where they fit in during a naval engagement, their core strengths and weaknesses and how to best utilize them. And in a subsequent video, we'll also cover medium, heavy fighters, and of course, multi-crew ships as well in naval combat. Alright folks, that's it for me today, talking about the role of a light fighter in a naval engagement. If you did indeed enjoy this video, please leave a like as it really does help out the channel. And of course, if you want to watch more videos like this and much more down the line, be sure to subscribe as well. Of course, if you want to go a little bit above and beyond and support the work that I do here, you can also consider becoming a channel member like these fine folks right here, whose great contributions help me to put videos like this together. But until next time, fly safe and I'll see you all in the black.